Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about accountability. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, have you met any developers who struggled with accountability and getting themselves unblocked quickly and consistently got better at it? Do you know what helped them develop that skill? Uh, I would say that the thing that made them fix it is a lot of hard work over many years, because basically I see this as two separate things depending on what we're concretely talking about. Let me explain that a little bit. So if you're talking about the adoption of new practices within a team, that's one thing. If you're talking about learning how to effectively onboard yourself or figure out how a code base works, reverse engineering and so forth, I can say I've never seen that ever, and I will tell you why I've never seen it and explain. I'm not saying that it's impossible, I'm saying that it's very difficult, and let me share a little bit why I think that is and how to go about it. So first and foremost, it always depends on the task. If we're talking about learning how to work in a new team, then I see this quite often. So the way that people usually fix this, because as you can imagine, when you start in a new company or a new team or a new code base or anything like that, usually it doesn't really matter all that much if you're a senior, a junior, or so forth and so on. It does factor in, of course, but for the most part, you don't really know all the things that you need to know in order to get started. And so what I usually see people struggle with in the beginning is the confidence and the knowledge of acting within the environment. In other words, you don't know where the repo is, you don't know what all these magical environmental variables are doing, where they're stored, or you don't know where where the production environment is, etc., etc. These things are completely normal, and it's the same thing for me, it's the same thing for any software developer. And so what usually fixes that problem is that you ask for help, you get coaching, or you get answers to your questions. You have a support network around you that has some of that domain knowledge that you will need in order to make progress. And that is something that is fairly straightforward for a lot of people. I would say that on average it takes just, depending on how fast the person is or like how well they do. It can take something from a few weeks to a few months, but it's usually a fairly straightforward process. Now, on the other hand, if you're talking about basically you're put in a situation where you have nothing like that, you're supposed to figure out how a legacy code base works, or you're supposed to basically implement a story or something like that, and you're struggling with that, or when I see software developers struggle with getting tasks done within the code itself. That I've never seen anybody fix in any meaningful amount of time. The reason being because I argue that this is a very similar beast to what I argue is the determining factor for development speed. So a lot of companies have this idea that, well, if I just have more developers, I'm going to get faster results. And I always tell them, no, what will happen is that you will get more things done. And that is a very big difference, because if you have a given deadline for a given project and you need to have it done by an exact date, unless you have the capacity, even if you add more developers, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to meet the deadline, because even if you had 10 developers, there's only 2 people who can effectively work on the task itself, because even if you add more people, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can contribute to that deadline. And the thing that determines whether or not you're going to meet that deadline, apart from the obvious things like the state of the code base and having answers to your questions and so forth, the most taboo thing I can say here, but it is the only thing I've ever seen matter, is talent. Talent is the thing that dictates how fast a person solves the problem or implements the feature or things like that. And I'm not saying that it's a inherent thing to the individual in question. I'm saying that different developers are at different capacities. You can almost think of us as batteries. We have different levels of charge, and it doesn't really matter if you put a bunch of like low-end batteries or low-end developers on a project. It doesn't mean that you're going to get a bigger output or like a higher charge. You're going to have to find someone who is skilled enough to do this as fast as possible. This is the same thing, because they are, in my opinion, they are one of the same. One factor that I always tell the juniors that you will have to learn to be an effective software developer is to basically find the answers to your own questions. The reason being because in many cases you are thrown into an environment or a feature or something like that where you might be able to ask some people for help, but you won't be able to have them hold your hand for every single little thing. Some of the stuff, quite a lot of the stuff as you go on during your career, you're going to have to figure out for yourself. And that is a skill. It is a skill that you need to, that it's directly correlated into how well do you know your tools, how much experience do you have, how intelligent are you, like how good are you at problem solving and all these sorts of things, right? And so the reason why I say that I've never seen it is because the time period it takes a person to go from basically not being able to do any of these sorts of things to being fairly good at it is years of really, 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 really hard work. I know this for a fact because I started out the same way. The reason why I can move at the speed that I am today, like depending on if you feel like I'm fast or slow or so forth, it doesn't really matter. It's the same thing with any software developer. You have it's in a sense it's like jogging. If you jog quite a lot, you will get better at it and you will get faster at it. But if someone comes to you today and says, I'm going to need you to run a marathon, and you've never run a marathon, but you actually need to do it, then it doesn't matter because you don't have enough time to get up to the fitness level necessary in order to do that thing. And so what I usually tell companies is that, because we talk a lot about things such as should we do investments into this individual, do we provide training, things like that. And the inconvenient truth that I tell companies who have hired a software developer or a team or so forth that can't produce at the level that they need them to produce is that you will not be able to train them. It's that, or rather you will, but we're talking about an investment that may or may not work, because one factor that is also not discussed all that much is the developer willing? Because if you take the analogy to the gym or to running or something like that, some people are just happy going to the gym, doing a little bit of light cardio or light weight training to stay sort of in shape, and some people are marathon runners and like really, really push it, or bodybuilders and so forth and so forth. And it's the same thing with your workers. If you need a high performance software developer, you can't just arbitrarily pick someone and make sure and say that they should be producing at that level, because they might not even have the interest in becoming that good. They might try really, really hard during work hours or things like that, but that is simply not enough. And I've never seen that be enough. This is, as I said, this is where the truly talented software developers usually shine. Either they have inherent ability, or like they're really, really just have a knack for the software thing and they only work in work hours, or they do the thing that I've done for years, which is literally just, this is what I do. Like, I work on software projects in my spare time. I try to educate myself, etc. So that for really, really hard work, you can get up to a certain level. And as I said, that is down to the individual, him or herself. They might not be willing to do this, or even if they were willing, you have no control over how fast their learning curve is going to be. And as a company, it's usually unfeasible if you have someone who's underperforming or having a hard time or so forth to say, yeah, we're just going to invest in you until you fix this problem. Because as I said, it can take, and in many cases it does, it takes years and years and years. And this is one of those main factors as to why people don't want to hire juniors, because the time it takes them to go from the speed or like the ability that they have to the level that usually companies need them to be is measured in years. It's not months, and usually companies are all about the short term. Like you have a few months, or like depending on what you mean with short term, of course, but they're usually not in it for, like, they're not going to invest usually in an individual where they won't see a return on investment for maybe years, maybe ever, depending on the situation. So what I want you to take away from this is that the only time I've seen someone improve their ability to unblock themselves, or like basically take more ownership, or be able to take care of greater and greater challenges within software, is through a lot of hard work. Usually on their own volition. It's not just something that you do during work hours. It's the difference between, it's the same thing with sports or whatever. Some people perform at a really, really high level and some people perform at a really low level. And there's definitely some measurement of talent involved there, but it's also possible to do that through hard work. But as I said, you have no guarantees here because, as I said, people are like batteries in many cases where you have a capacity and you can increase that capacity to a certain degree, but it doesn't really say whether or not you're going to be able to deal with all the situation in your current job. Usually it's more effective for a individual to go to a different job, or like a company to get rid of a person if they don't meet the speed or like the performance levels that they're looking for. Because as I said, guys, I've never seen it. The only time I've seen anybody improve that drastically is when they were slacking off and they really were really, really good, and then they decided to be serious about the thing. But if we're talking about, normal tasks, get onboarded or like start working in a work environment and sort of learn the daily grind, so to speak, that I see quite a lot, and that is usually fairly easy. That's something that companies and individuals can fix very easily by having mentorship, having domain knowledge spreading and things like that, and doing sessions and pair programming and so forth, that you can train in a fairly short amount of time. But when it comes to raw talent, as I said, how fast people deliver on individual stories, at what quality level and things like that, or if they're able to pick up like basically any product and just start being productive, that is not something that I've seen people be able to train into an individual in any amount of reasonable time from a company's perspective. But for you as a software developer, you can definitely do this, because this is the thing that I tell people is the difference between quality education and not so quality education, and the difference between being a senior and a mid-level, a junior, and so forth. If you put your effort in and you really do, as I said, like it's like literally like going to the gym. If you really work hard at it, you can improve, and I promise you can improve drastically. When I started, guys, I was not even in the top 10 in my class when I started as a software developer. But today I can perform at a level where quite a lot of people feel that I produce in a fairly good manner. So it's not like you're not able to become better. It's just that you really have to work at it. Have a great day.